It is only fitting to begin an article about the 1981 Mr. Olympia competition by remembering what happened at last year's contest. To no one's surprise, the event this year picked up with an air of controversy it left off with last year. Recall that on the eve of the 1980 event, Arnold Schwarzenegger unexpectedly announced that he would be in the event, not just as an organizer, but as a competitor. With the camera crew ready to film a sequel to Pumping Iron, Arnold was picked the winner by a group of judges which included some substitute judges chosen at the last minute to fill in for previously scheduled judges who disqualified themselves. Perhaps in no previous Olympia had the judges been so second-guessed and criticized as they were after the 1980 Mr. Olympia. Full of hard feelings, some bodybuilders who competed at last year's event immediately began talking about boycotting this year's Olympia. Significantly, three of the most respected figures in bodybuilding, Frank Zane, Mike Mentzer, and Boyer Coe, did not compete in the 1981 contest. The controversy surrounding the 1981 Mr. Olympia is sure to surpass that of last year's competition. The 1981 IFBB Mr. Olympia competition returned to Veterans Memorial Hall in Columbus, Ohio, of October 10th. On the same bill was the Mr. International competition. Again, Arnold Schwarzenegger was present, this time as an organizer of the event. When Arnold stepped onto the stage before the start of the Olympia, he was greeted by a mixed crowd reaction of applause and boos. He responded by saying, "I hear the boos." While Arnold was addressing the audience, he was drowned out several times by angry fans yelling, "Where's Mentzer?" or "Where's Zane?" But after this lukewarm reception, Arnold was able to win over the audience with his magnetic personality. When Arnold left the stage, the event that had so many bodybuilding fans had traveled from around the world to see started. Each of the competitors were individually announced and stood proudly under the spotlight against a completely dark background. Many familiar faces were there. Steve Davis went through a very tasteful posing routine, emphasizing movement and grace. Unfortunately, he looked small on stage, and this prevented him from becoming one of the finalists. Dennis Turnerino, one of the biggest bodybuilders, was warmly received by the audience. Although he sported a confident smile and masterful stage presence, he was not at his peak for his contest. Ed Corney demonstrated why he is called the master poser, but unfortunately no longer has the abs or size he once did and was unable to make the final cut. Two other veterans of the sport, Ken Waller and Mike Katz, were also there, although they did not display the physiques of former years. Samir Banu got a big reception from the international crowd and delivered a masterful posing exhibition. However, he lacked the definition necessary to place in the top 6. Herbert Metz, a newcomer to the Olympia, showed impressive vascularity, but did not place high in this year's event, although he may well be a threat in the future Olympias. Other notables who had threw down the gauntlet were Johnny Fuller and Carlos Rodriguez. Without question, though, the athletes displaying the most impressive physiques were the 6 finalists listed in order in which they were announced. Finalists: Padilla, Wolkaltz, Callender, Platz, Colombo, and Dickerson. Although these were the 6 best bodybuilders of those who entered the contest, the final placings of them sparked controversy. Indeed, many in audience believed the end result was not made on merit and could just as easily have been made by drawing straws. Danny Padilla, always a crowd favorite, came in his best shape ever. Padilla was easily the shortest man on stage, but he was a giant with his followers. Padilla looked very good overall, displaying a nice balance of mass, proportion, and definition. Unfortunately, his performance was marred by his poor stage presence. Danny could not rid himself of a sarcastic look on his face and defeatist attitude. It was clear that Danny did not believe he could win the Olympia because of his height, not size or proportion. Padilla's attitude detracted from his appearance, and he could do well in the future to change this. Nevertheless, Padilla looked good and is a worthy challenger for the title. Giuseppe Wilkos made his debut at the Olympia with his own brand of style as the tallest and only bearded finalist in the group. As last year's Mr. International winner, he faced fierce competition in this year's Olympia. Wilcox was in prime condition and looked hungry for a win. However, Wilcox's posing routine was sluggish, and his face was for the most part expressionless. He did not show off his body to his best advantage, but with a little more experience and work, he may one day win the Olympia. Roy Callender looked beastly and was clearly the most muscular competitor in the field. Just as the massive Canadian started his routine, the music he was posing to, all of the contestants posed to music, stopped. Callender was disgusted and left the stage temporarily. The audience booed, expressing sympathy with Callender's predicament. As he came out for the second time, Callender was greeted with great applause, and even though his music stopped again, Roy continued to pose, and the crowd reacted with even more enthusiasm. As it turned out, Callender completed his posing routine just as well without the music. Callender rose to the occasion, displaying superb thighs and clearly the best chest of all competitors. His chest was massive, rounded and cut, and reminiscent of Arnold's in his heyday. Callender's back and arms were also big and rippling with definition. The only weak point Roy displayed was his calves, which due to heredity are high on his legs and not quite big enough. Tom Platz stepped on stage as the clear audience favorite to the rhythmic chant of Platz, Platz, Platz. Tom responded by electrifying the crowd with a devastating leg shot. Platz is easily the most improved bodybuilder around and displayed a ripped upper body with tree trunk legs chiseled to perfection. Platz had a marvelous stage presence, always showing a grin from ear to ear. He seemed to look confident and enjoy himself. His only deficiency is that his legs are so big that they are out of proportion with his upper body. Franco Colombo initially received a warm greeting from the crowd. After all, he has not competed since his unfortunate knee injury 5 years ago. His appearing in the competition caught the audience by surprise, much like Arnold's appearance last year did. Franco's upper body was proportionate and ripped. He had the most upper body vascularity of the finalists, and he managed to regain his famous lat spread. None of the other contestants could match Franco's lat spread. Also, Franco sported the unusual split across his chest as in former days. Unfortunately, Franco's legs were without question the worst on stage of all the contestants. His thighs and calves had some size, but they were not cut at all. This severely detracted from his overall appearance. Chris Dickerson was the last athlete to pose, and sometimes the best is saved for last. Chris looked fantastic overall, with a good balance of size, definition, and proportion. He displayed the same superb physique that placed him first in the Grand Prix circuit last year. Chris posed in a fluid and artistic fashion. His calves and thighs were big and cut. His abs looked good. His chest and back were in peak condition. Perhaps the only deficiency with Dickerson were his biceps, which were slightly small in proportion to the rest of his body. Nevertheless, Chris still looked devastating overall. After all the competitors had finished their individual posing routines, the 6 finalists were called onto stage to perform the compulsory poses. For the first time in the evening, the crowd could see the finalists posing at the same time. At one point in the mandatories, Padilla stepped out of place and stood next to Franco before the judges could tell Danny to return to his spot. When the compulsories were completed, the contestants put on a free-form posing exhibition that nearly brought the crowd to its feet. Platz and Dickerson flanked Franco and highlighted leg shots, while Franco concentrated on upper body poses. But the high point of the show was after the finalists were told to step back off the platform and relax while the judges tabulated the results. Playfully, Platz and Dickerson, still flanking Colombo, continued to match legs with Franco. Colombo responded by twisting and turning his upper body. Meanwhile, the other athletes got involved in the action, and eventually all 6 went back on stage to continue the fierce rivalry. The audience went wild with applause and excitement. Then came the moment of truth. The judges announced their decision. Wilcox finished 6th, Padilla 5th, Callender 4th, Platz 3rd, Dickerson 2nd, and Colombo 1st. The crowd erupted 3-1 with boos when Franco was declared the winner, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind that the vast majority of bodybuilding fans in the audience disagreed with the result. It is true that groups of fans expressed disappointment with each stage of the judging. Some people booed when Wilkos was awarded 6th place and Padilla awarded 5th place. But this should not be interpreted to mean that bodybuilding fans are poor sports or unknowledgeable, so that the judges can announce just any decision at all because they cannot please everyone all of the time. Although there is a subjective element involved in judging, every bodybuilding contest, a viewer can still look to several objective criteria such as size, proportion, symmetry, definition, vascularity, etc., to aid in his decision. The audience is capable of considering 3 objective factors and knows when they are disregarded. The crowd knew it that night in Columbus when Callender was awarded 4th place because the boos increased dramatically. However, it was no disgrace for Callender to place behind Platz and Dickerson, considering the fine shape they were in. The booing increased again when Platz was declared the 3rd place finisher. But the crowd's reaction came to a head when Dickerson was named the runner-up and Franco announced the winner. The fans rose to their feet and reacted with deafening shouts and boos, while Callender and Dickerson left the stage. Relatively few waited around long enough to see Franco receive his first-place trophy. Colombo may have been the biggest name in the controversial 1981 Mr. Olympia, a contest unattended by many of the premier bodybuilders, but in the face of the crowd's reaction, it must have been a hollow victory for Franco.